Welcome to the Expected Bets 4 podcast, your go-to podcast for all things hockey betting. I am Gretzky Betsky, and joining me today is my co-host Franco the Banker. Gator is still on his wild adventure in Europe, so unfortunately he is not making it. But, we figured we can just get some of our favorite guests to come in and kind of take his spot and get some guys who are experts on some of the teams we're talking about while they're gone. And we brought in none other than Terry, who is one of the best NHL cappers out there. And on top of it is a diehard Minnesota Wild fan. So as you can probably expect, we are going to be talking about the Minnesota Wild today in their season preview. Terry, how are you doing? And if you want to give a shout out for all your socials, go ahead, because you also do a awesome show that goes kind of all season long. And you were doing some team previews as well. I joined for the Utah Hockey Club one. So go ahead, Terry. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for hockey to be back. When hockey was ending, the Stanley Cup, when it was at the end of the season, I was like, okay, I'm ready for baseball. Like, had enough of hockey. The Wild were gone, so it wasn't as interesting. But no, I love hockey regardless. But I was ready for the season to end, and now I'm at that point where I can't wait.
I
I
know.
can't wait. A lot of exciting teams to look at this year, and a lot of money to be made. So yeah, you can follow me, Terry Edelman Picks on YouTube, Let's Go Wild Picks on Twitter, and also TE Picks on Twitter. So you can find me there. And yeah, I do lots of hockey betting
Yep.
throughout the season for sure.
Yeah, I definitely feel like you've been like kind of one of the OG NHL cappers on the Twitter sphere, and I think kind of this whole group has kind of found each other. And if you're not involved on kind of the hockey Twitter capping NHL capping community, definitely give everybody a follow because it's a great community. A lot of people supporting each other, helping each other out, giving great advice. And Terry, you were one of the ones that I found when I kind of got my Gretzky Betsky account going that I definitely like looked up to, and it was always like looking forward to your content that would come out all the time. So thank you so much for everything you've contributed to the community, and we're so happy to have you here. Franco, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Busy as always.
Yeah.
I mean, NFL's going strong. NHL's right around the corner. We got playoff baseball around the corner. So it's as
Yeah,
busy as it
Phillies.
gets here, man. Like it's Phillies in the playoffs. So
Are they
it's
going to
gonna be
play my
wild.
Snakes again?
I don't know.
Round
We'll
two?
see. We'll see, man.
Yeah.
That wild card spot is going to be very interesting over these next couple of days here, especially with that Braves Mets series being rained out. So they're gonna have a
Yep.
doubleheader before the playoffs start, which is
Yep.
wild. So
Yeah.
Well, let's jump right into it with a little bit of the Minnesota Wild team breakdown. All right, so last season, the Minnesota Wild kind of are in like a weirder spot where it felt a little bit like a lot of things went wrong, kind of in the midst of maybe a little bit of a retool. Obviously, they still have Kirill Kaprizov, who is kind of their superstar, had 87 points, 39 wins, 34 losses, and 9 overtime losses. Not much movement this offseason. We're kind of seeing pretty much the same team that they rolled out last year, but obviously the younger pieces are getting a little bit older. They're approaching their prime, especially people like Boldy. Marco Rossi will have his kind of full second season. And then there's a couple names that actually may make the roster. And then obviously the big guy, Brock Faber, who really turned a lot of heads, probably could have been the Norris winner. We can get into that a little bit, or sorry, Calder winner. We can get into that a little bit later here. But otherwise, departures, I mean, we're kind of talking about secondary pieces like Goligoski and Beckman. I mean, it wasn't too big of an off season. We were kind of talking about before that Zach Parise and Ryan Suter contract are finally going to be coming off the books. So at that point, there's going to be a little bit more cap wiggle room to kind of tinker with the roster in the off seasons. But Terry, any big additions, subtractions, anything you're really thinking about this roster that stands out, or are you kind of excited to see more growth from those younger players and kind of the whole team gelling a little bit better this season?
Well, like you said, the Wild had a down year last year, And a lot of reason for that was obviously the coaching change with Dean Evison having to be fired, John Hines coming in, a lot of injuries. Jared Spurgeon, the captain,
Yep.
missing most of the season. He, a lot of people, he's underrated, Jared Spurgeon. A lot of people might not really know a lot about him, but he is a huge piece to that defense for the Wild. Jonas Brodin was hurt a lot. So Brock Faber had to be a one man guy on
Yeah.
that defense and just hold things together. Alex Goligoski's gone, but that's an addition by subtraction. I'm totally
Unfortunately,
fine
yes.
with him going. He's one of the guys on my list. I was hoping that he would retire. Like I appreciate his time here, but it was
Yep.
at the end of his career. The other guys going, Mason Shaw is a fan favorite in Minnesota, but constant injuries. There's just no room for him in the bottom of the lineup. Adam Beckman, definitely there was that potential with him. He had a great season in the WHL, I believe, led points and goals the one season, but didn't really. He's had multiple chances in the NHL, and other than a one really good preseason game, he's never really lived up to potential. So the additions are gone. Yakov Trenin brought in. I really like
Yeah.
that addition.
I
He's a
do
good
too.
defensive forward in that third line. Has an edge to him. And I know it might sound crazy, but adding another Russian is not a bad thing for the Wild. You want to keep Kaprizov happy. His contract is going to be coming up soon. So you want to keep him happy. I think adding Trennan does that. And then the other addition is Jacob Lauko that was brought in from Boston. And he's really turned a lot of heads in training preseason. And I'm hearing that he could very well find a spot on this team. So um, we'll see how that goes. Of course, Liam Ogren really wants to make
Yeah.
the team as well. I think his spot is the one spot I think that is kind of up in the air right now. And then Frederick Gaudreau, Columbus, Dean Evison. You love Frederick Gaudreau. Give Bill Guerin a call. You can have Frederick Gaudreau. We'll throw in Marcus Johansson as well. Merry Christmas.
Yep.
That's my thoughts there.
Yeah, and I think this is a team where like having those extra roster spots is going to kind of slowly become something that's more valuable because the Minnesota Wild, there's a lot of similarities to me with the Dallas Stars. They tend to draft very, very well. So there are people in this pipeline that are probably going to start knocking at the door. And like you mentioned, Liam Ogren is definitely one of them. And even Jesper Wallstedt, kind of the goalie phenom here. I don't know if he'll really kind of make a debut. I don't even know if he's able to make the jump quite yet, but with Fleury
He
being the
played in a few
backup.
games last year, and
Okay, thank you.
from what John Hines has said is that he's going to get 3 games. I think he was kind of saying he's going to get some games at the beginning of the year, and then the Wild will kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Now, today, John Gibson was announced to be injured long term. So I wouldn't be surprised if Anaheim looks at Philip Gustafson, and I would not be surprised. The Wild are looking to move Philip Gustafson at some point. So there could be
Interesting.
a way to move a spot open for Wallstedt. He is the future
Interesting.
for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess if something like that were to happen this season, you're almost looking at kind of embracing maybe another down year, maybe one that's even a little bit worse than last season, in order to kind of speed up what the second kind of grouping of younger players could look like on this roster as they start to trickle in while keeping your core of Kaprizov, Boldy, Brock Faber, and then some of the vets that you still want to keep and start to build around that, which is kind of interesting. So, Franco, what do you think of this roster overall? The minor additions, minor subtractions. Do you think this is going to be a team that can improve on that record from last season, or do you think about the same or a little bit worse?
Well, I think the one question right now is the goaltending situation, right?
Yeah,
So I think it's very interesting that you're seeing Vezina odds and Calder odds for Wallstead.
yeah,
So I don't know if the books like know it's on its way. Something is in the works, kind of like what Terry was hinting at, and obviously the Gibson thing might expedite it, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I feel like a couple of years ago, Gustafson was the guy. Like
The Gus Bus.
he was fantastic, man. Like
Yeah.
just kind of came out of nowhere. He was always just kind of like an up and down guy, not really anything special before that season. And then last year, obviously, downturn a little bit. But like Terry said, I mean, they missed Brodeen. I know he played like 60 something games, but it felt like he was questionable or like in and out of the lineup almost every single night. And then Spurgeon is a major loss for them. I mean, you're talking about, in reality, those were their top two defensemen last year. I know Faber now has reached that point where we're ranking him up there as probably at least one of their top couple guys, but that wasn't the case coming into last season. You were relying on Spurgeon and Brodeen, and neither were there for a large chunk of the season. So is that what caused some of his downturn, Gustafson? I don't know, or is it just maybe he turned back into a pumpkin and that's who he is, just kind of like a mid-range goaltender that's maybe like best case or best suited for like a 1B 1A type situation for another team. So yeah, I think that's probably my biggest question with this team. Like, is Gus the long-term solution? I know there's a lot of people that are excited for Wallstead, but again, you don't know what you're going to have with a rookie goaltender. It's until you get to the NHL, it's not real until then. So yeah, I think that's my biggest question. Not too much movements, like you guys said, for the additions and subtractions here. My big sticking point, like I said before we started the show, is just that like Ryan Hartman's still on that top line with Kaprizov, and it just like hurts my soul every time I see it. Like I like Ryan Hartman as a player, but it's just like I want something more for Kaprizov, man. Like Zuccarello can stay on the wing because of like what he is, but like I don't know, man. Like he's just not a 1C, and I get it.
But
The cap perjury they've been in for so long has kind of prevented them from finding somebody to replace that role. And Eriksson Ek is really more well suited as that 2C. And yeah, I don't know. I just
it works out.
It works, but like there's always that point in the season where it like stagnates, right? Like Terry knows, like right, Kaprizov is just on fire, and then it's like, where's this line? It disappears for a while, and then they move Hartman off, they move Eriksson Ek up, or whatever the case is. They always seem to shift those lines at some point in the season because it's like, oh, actually maybe Hartman isn't that good on this line, and then they put him back. But long term, I mean, that's what I want from this team. I would really like to see a nice 1C to pair with Kaprizov because he's just so friggin' talented, and he deserves it, like, and Wild fans deserve to see what he can do with more skilled players around him.
Yeah. Well, let's transition to kind of our best and worst case scenarios for the season. But before we get into that, we'd like to talk to you about one of our wonderful sponsors, BetterHelp.
This episode of Expected Bets 4 is brought to you by BetterHelp. Have you ever stopped to think about something new you'd love to learn? As adults, we don't always make the time to learn we used to when we were kids. Kids are constantly exploring and growing, but somewhere along the way, life gets busy and we lose some of that curiosity. What's something you've been wanting to dive into? Maybe it's cooking, picking up a new language, or even figure out your golf game to finally beat your new friend. Just because we're older doesn't mean we have to stop growing. In fact, therapy can help you reconnect with that sense of wonder. It reminds you that your back-to-school moment can happen at any time. Therapy is not just for people who have gone through something major. It's for anyone looking to be the best version of themselves. Therapy can help you learn positive ways to cope with stress, set healthy boundaries, and tackle challenges with more confidence. It's really about giving yourself the tools to thrive and grow, no matter what stage of life you're in. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. Now back to the show.
All right, let's jump right into our best and worst case scenario. What we've been doing with kind of our guests on the show is allowing them to talk about the best case scenario. So, Terry, what are you kind of hoping to see from your favorite team? What could be that best case scenario that's, obviously reasonable? We know we would all love to see our team win the cup, but what could you reasonably expect to be the best case scenario for the Minnesota Wild this season?
I think best case scenario is that they make the playoffs and they win a playoff round.
Yeah.
This Wild team has been able to make the playoffs um, for quite a few years. Last year was one of the rare years that they've missed the playoffs, but they've not been able to go past the first round. They're becoming known as the Toronto Maple Leafs of the West, and that's not something that you want to be known
No.
as. So my best case scenario is that they make the playoffs, and then they beat whoever they face in the first round. Maybe they finish third in the Central. That would be a surprise. Um, I that would be like the high point, I think,
Yeah.
that the Wild could get to.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And then obviously seeing a lot of progression from those younger guys. Maybe Boldy takes even another step and looks like one of more like an elite winger rather than just a very good top winger. Brock Faber kind of taking another step and really solidifying himself as maybe one of the best, if not the best, young and up and coming defensemen in the league. I think those would all help kind of make a first or second round playoff exit even a little bit more cushy than they would already feel. But Franco, let's let you be the bearer of bad news. What do you think that worst case scenario looks like for this team?
Yeah, I think we're talking another down year.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing if they do move on from Gustafsson, able to get like something nice in return. Like he still has value at this point. Like you would think they would get a pretty good haul for him. Goalies like that just don't grow on trees, right? And then you get Wallstead that run, give Fleury his sending off. I don't know if this is going to be his last year or not, but you expect that Fleury would be in a good situation to allow Wallstead to grow and learn and not be overburdened, where he's playing like 60 games or something like that if they were to trade Gustafsson before the season starts. So as much as that's like a bad situation, them missing the playoffs and it's kind of a good thing in the same sense because you're getting that rookie goaltender some experience and you're getting more growth from the other players. And like you guys said, you're finally freeing up that cap space from Suter and Parise next year. So that might be a good worst case. I think the bad worst case would be if Gustafsson stays. He's not the guy they thought he was. His value tanks because they aren't able to trade him or they don't trade him, and really, Wallstead just spends another year down in the AHL, and this team just finishes outside the playoffs or fringe type of team like that, and there's more just questions going into next season, I guess.
Yeah, ice cold. Yeah, I'd have to agree, especially kind of losing some value on some of those players. And again, this is a team that can draft so well. So having some extra capital in the draft or maybe even a little bit higher of a first could probably go a long way for this team. But it definitely feels like a little bit of a team that's pretty good, that's also still kind of stuck in limbo. And I think it really does feel like in the next couple years, you're going to kind of start to see a new identity around the Minnesota Wild with some of the kids and bringing some of those kids in. So any other comments about kind of best or worst case scenario?
Yeah, I wanted to say Fleury is retiring, so he's
Okay.
already announced this is his final year. I'm really going to be looking forward to when the Wild go to Pittsburgh. Fleury will definitely start that game.
Yeah.
That's going to be a really emotional game for him. And then my worst case scenario, which is kind of a best case scenario in a way as well, would be that the Wild were to miss the playoffs because, in my opinion, this team is not a contender right now.
No.
If they make the playoffs, they most likely get bounced from the first round again. And I don't want to see that. I would rather see a top draft pick come in here. And the Wild have not always been good at drafting. If you look at from years 2005 2004 to 2010, the Wild drafted bust after bust after bust. But Bill Guerin bringing in Judd Brackett from Vancouver, Vancouver was absolutely crazy to let him go. That is one of the reasons that he's the reason why the Wild have been so good at drafting. So I wouldn't mind a top draft pick. And
Mhm.
Wild fans watching are going to hate what I'm about to say, but there is the possibility of a Kaprizov trade.
Oof.
That is not off the
Oof.
table. If Kaprizov is not going to resign, if he kind of makes it clear to Guerin that he does want to go elsewhere, Bill Guerin is not going to let the Marian Gaborik. Now, of course, I was with a different general manager, of course, but the Wild are not going to let Marian Gaborik 2.0. They're not going to let him
Yeah.
walk for nothing. So I want Kaprizov to be here forever. I do. But Wild fans and obviously people watching the team have to be prepared that there is the possibility that Kaprizov could be traded. And of course, if that happens, then that is bringing in more draft picks.
Yep.
And that's kind of going into more of a rebuild, but it would be a quick one with all the young guys the Wild already have. If you
Mhm.
were to move Kaprizov and get a young guy, a couple draft picks, first round picks, it's not going to be free to get Kaprizov, but there could be a way to move him if he does want to leave and bring in some young talent and some draft picks. So that situation, if that was to happen, then of course the Wild would be at the bottom of a very tough Central Division. It's not going to be fun, the Central Division this year. So
Yeah.
I could see a
Well,
lot of things happening this year.
I'll be the first to say the Flyers will take him if you guys really don't want him.
I was just going to say that. I was going to say,
I
imagine if we
I would
put
love to see
Kaprizov
that.
with another young Russian.
Yeah,
I was worried
that'd
I
be
was going to hear a big
fantastic.
thump on your desk, Franco. But
It would cost you. It would cost you.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
fine. I'm fine. Let's do it. I'll do it right now.
Well,
I'll pack the bags.
and to be fair, it's not a terrible time to maybe kind of think about going full tank, because in the 2026 draft, there's a little player named McKenna who is already turning heads and is kind of being hailed as the Dardish kind of franchise top player of a generation type player. So, man, that would really speed things up too. So, really interesting scenarios here. But let's start jumping into kind of some of the betting aspect of the show. So we'll go through some of the point totals and some of the different scenarios for the team props and player props in just a moment. Before that, I would like to talk to you about our other sponsor, DraftKings.
TD, Tutty, taking it to the house. Whatever you call a touchdown, they matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. The NFL season is back in full swing, and who doesn't love rooting for a touchdown? So be sure to check out the latest odds at DraftKings Sportsbook. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Only at DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
All right, now let's get into some of the team futures and future player props for the Minnesota Wild. So as you can see to the right side of the screen here, we have their season point total set at 93.5. to make the playoffs at -135, to miss it at +105, which is kind of interesting and starts to show the book's hands of what they think may happen with this team. Division winner at +1,000, conference winner at +1,800, and obviously Stanley Cup winner at +3,500. Terry, any of these, are you willing to take any of these actually, or any of these kind of stand out as something that you're willing to bet on, even as a diehard fan?
I have a player future, which we'll get to in a bit, but when it comes to the team future bets, I can't take no to make the playoffs
No.
because for people that don't know me, I will not bet against the Minnesota Wild. I will not do it. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to bet them every game. In fact, I'm going to bet them a lot less this year than I have in previous years. But I will not bet against this team. So to make the playoff, to bet them not to make the playoffs is just rooting for them to lose, and I can't do that. I cannot do that. So I can't bet no, but I can't recommend anyone to bet yes at -135.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't think that they can do it, because with Jared Spurgeon, if they stay healthy,
Yeah.
and some of these young guys take the next step, if their goaltending slightly improves from last year, then this team could definitely make the playoffs and be in the top 3 in the division. But that's a lot of ifs. And with that -135, I just can't recommend that. So, and if I can't recommend them to make the playoffs, I can't really look at the division, conference, or Stanley
Yeah.
Cup either. And then win total, they're in such a tough division. Um, I think they could hit the over, but I'm not confident enough to pull the trigger on it.
Yeah, well, what we've noticed was last season, teams that had 91 points or more generally made the playoffs. So I do think there's a little bit of correlation here, which honestly makes me appeal to that and miss the playoffs. Unfortunately, at +105, you're getting a little plus money value on it. Like you mentioned, this division is getting tough. I mean, you got Colorado, Dallas at the top, Nashville really loaded up this offseason. Utah's looking a lot better. You can't count out the Winnipeg Jets. And, well, Chicago's still probably going to be near the bottom here, but that's not going to leave too much room for error. And even St. Louis kind of looks like a big question mark. And they kind of feel like a team that's kind of similar to the Minnesota Wild. Maybe they're not as strong on the roster, but they always kind of can make some noise. So that mushy middle of this division feels a lot tighter and a lot less separation now that, the Arizona Coyotes / Utah team is really kind of starting to take that next step. And again, a team that I felt was going to be kind of a mushy middle team in the Nashville Predators really loaded up and now kind of look like a much stronger team. Franco, anything here on this menu of options that stand out to you? Or should we just move right to the player props?
I'm pretty good. I mean, I don't love the price either way. Like I wish I was getting a little bit better value on either if I liked either side. Like it's almost like the books don't really know what they want to do with this team either, with the way those lines are priced at -135 for yes. Like, are we really feeling that confident that this is a playoff team? Like I don't like, but -135 especially doesn't make me feel very good about it either. Just paying that price, even if I liked it,
It almost feels like a bait line. Make you feel confident in that, they must be pretty good if they think they're going to make the playoffs. But
I think there's too many questions. As much as I like the young pieces, like I think Boldy's a fantastic player, and I think he does take a step forward this year. I thought Rossi showed some flashes last year as well. Like they have some pieces that are exciting and young, and it's just it's a little too much for my liking to be laying anything like that, especially with these other teams in this division. So yeah, count me out.
Okay. Well, let's move right over to some of the player futures. Right now, there's only 2 offerings on DraftKings. We got Brock Faber at 53.5 points and Kaprizov at 99.5 points. And then we have the goal option with Eriksson Ek at 27.5 and Kaprizov at 46.5 goals. No Boldy right now. Terry told us earlier that he is kind of injured right now. And even though he's expected to make it back into the roster by the season debut. It still is something that the books seem to be kind of shying away from. So again, any of these that really stand out, Faber 53.5 is kind of interesting. Kaprizov at 99.5 feels really tight. And then Eriksson, Ack, or Kaprizov at goals. Anyone that you really kind of like and are circling?
Well, Brock Faber point is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the issue, though, and I do like him to have another good season, and I could see him going over that point total, but he's not going to get as much of an offensive opportunity, especially on the power play. Declan Chisholm is slated to be the D guy on the top power play, so Faber won't get as many power play opportunities, and I think that might be a reason why he may not hit the point total. Now, against that, uh, if the D pair, if Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin stay healthy, then Brock Faber is going to have a lot less pressure on him. And playing with Jonas Brodin, who's one of the best defensive defensemen in the league, is going to give Faber an opportunity to be more defensive minded. So I could see him hitting it. I could see him finishing just under. But I love Joel Eriksson over on his goals. When Joel Eriksson was drafted in 2015, a lot of Wild fans were really upset that it wasn't Brock Besser that the Wild drafted, that they went with Joel Eriksson instead. And Joel Eriksson, his first season in Minnesota, he had 7 points in 15 games. The next season, he only had 16 points in 75 games, 14 points in 58 games. So people were saying this guy's a bust. Why did the Wild draft him? But each year, since 2019, he's increased his point total. 29 points in 62, 30 in only 56 games played. 2021, 49 points in 21-22, 61 points 22-23, and then 64 in 77 games played last year with 30 goals. We've only seen Joel Eriksson improve year after year after year, and he's really turning into that top six center that you love. And he's extremely great defensively, but he is that net front guy. So on the power play, the Wild are going to be shooting pucks at the net, and Joel Eriksson is going to be there, and it's going to hit him off on the stick and go in, or it's going to hit his leg and go in. He's going to get goals in front of the net. So I love the over 27.5, I believe it is. He had 30 last year, and I like him to continue to improve this year.
Yeah, I like that look a lot. And, if you're into the shots on goal market, or SOGs, as we like to call them, Joel Eriksson is by far a favorite. I mean, his road home splits, I'll need to look back at the data to remember which one it is, if he's better. I think it's his home. It was something crazy, like around 75% hit rate. Nice thing with him too is he'll get bumped up to 3.5 throughout the season, and oh man, he is a good shots on goal ride, whether it's a parlay piece when he's down at the 2.5 level, or you're getting that extra value when they bump him up. So player to circle, and it looks like his goal total for the season long prop is something that looks a little tasty to me as well. Franco, anything here you like as well?
Yeah, I think first thing to note was that I was really disappointed that Boldy lines weren't available when I checked the other day. So,
yeah, that's the type of player I'd like to place the bet on getting better and beating maybe what books are expecting to, because he seems like he's really at the cusp of maybe something big, like maybe kind of being in that Forsberg realm of a winger. Maybe that's a little bit
He's
of
been
high
streaky. But
yes,
when he's hot,
he's good,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so when he's hot, he can be a better goal scorer than Kaprizov when he's red hot. The issue is he hasn't been able to sustain it.
Consistency.
Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully, like if he's hot, I don't mind backing his goal. So, like, obviously, we're not getting that option right now. So he'll be a player like to start the season. I'd be looking to back for goal props in general, but he would have been one I would have been interested in for his goal prop season long as well. I don't mind the Eriksson Ek look. I think that's a good look. He's pretty much solidified himself as that 2C on this team regardless. He gets PK time, he gets power play time, so he gets so much ice time on this team. He's out there to kill the clock at the end of the game too when the other team has the empty net, so that's another thing to kind of consider as well. And that Faber points prop looks good too. I mean, we're going to get into some futures here for the awards and stuff like that in a couple of minutes, but I think Faber builds on last year, like you said, playing with a guy like Brodin, who's just very sound, solid defensive veteran. And there's still a lot of talent around him, regardless of, like you were saying, maybe he takes a step off of that power play one unit. We'll see. But yeah, I think regardless, I think the pieces around him should help continue his upward trajectory this year.
Yeah. Well, outside of the props, let's talk about some of the player awards. These ones, I don't really have anything completely circled, but now the more I look at it, there's maybe something that would be worth for a very big long shot. But we got Kaprizov for the Rocket Richard trophy at plus 1,500. Kaprizov for the Art Ross at plus 3,500. Kaprizov for the Hart Trophy at 2,000. Faber for the Norris at plus 7,500. The Vezina, we have a split with Gustafsson at plus 7,500 and Wallstedt at plus 15,000. Calder Trophy, we have Wallstedt at plus 5,000, Ogren at plus 7,500. Then we have the Selke with Eriksson Ek at plus 3,000, Boldy at plus 4,000, and then Jack Adams, we have John Hines for plus 2,200. Any of those awards that you think are worth a sprinkle or worth, putting a little bit of units on it?
Well, I've made the statement that Brock Faber is going to win a Norris Trophy in his career.
Okay.
So
Don't hate it.
When is that going to happen? I can't tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you. Plus 7,500 is such a nice price.
Yeah.
The issue, though, is that guys like Evan Bouchard. Evan Bouchard's on that top power play with an Oilers team that is so offensively gifted. You've got Cale Makar, and you've got Quinn Hughes. There's just, as much as I love Faber, but he hasn't shown that he's in that group yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm not quite ready to go there. And as much as I'd like to say Wallstedt for the Calder, the issue with that is that the Calder trophy, as we saw last year, with Brock Faber having an amazing year and losing to Bedard, the Calder is going to go to whoever scores the most points.
Yep.
And unfortunately for Wallstedt, while he did score a goal in the AHL the year before last, I don't think he's going to be leading rookies in points. So for that to happen, Gustafsson would have to get traded, and Wallstedt would have to take the starting job from Flower and get the Wild to the playoffs. If all that happens, then Wallstedt could very well win the Calder. So too many ifs. So unfortunately, as a Wild fan, I would love to say bet everything, but there's just nothing I can pull the trigger on right now when it comes
Now,
to
what
awards.
if I pivot this a little bit on the Calder one and say Ogren may be worth a tiny, tiny sprinkle? Definitely nothing too crazy. Depending on your unit size here, you're probably looking at a cup of coffee or a happy hour beer, nothing more than that. But if he creeps his way up this roster and is playing on a line with Eriksson Ek and Boldy, and maybe he finds enough chemistry that he's getting some appearances on that top power play unit, or definitely the second power play unit, the Calder's kind of a big mucky mess this season. I think there's a lot of players who are obviously favorites. You have Salabrini, Mishkov kind of entering the league. Lane Hudson looks incredible from some of those insane clips we're seeing out of Montreal. But a lot of this does base off opportunity and who you're playing with. And man, if Algren turns enough heads, he could get a little bit of some cushy roster spots. There's definitely room for him on the top 6 if he's good enough. He'd be with one of the best defensive centers in the league, responsible Eriksson Ek, and Boldy is not too young. So, maybe they'd feel confident kind of putting them there to get an injection in skill. Again, I think this is an extreme long shot, kind of like you said with the Wallstead comment too, but this one of those ones that it's almost worthwhile to just kind of keep your eye out, see how he's doing in training camp. And, if day 1 or game 1 of the year, all of a sudden he's getting bumped up, that may be worth kind of pulling the trigger on just a little dash of Ogren on the Calder. Franco, anything that stands out for you?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Potentially Eriksson X Selke. I mean, I think he has the point total there. He's a hell of a defensive forward. As much as we're talking about his offensive game during this podcast, like I think he's very good defensively as well. I think at plus 3,000, that feels really nice as a price for sure. So that might be something I would consider. We've talked about before on the show where Selke kind of feels like a trophy that's like not so clearly defined. All these other ones are, well, for the most part, clear. Obviously, you can make some arguments about the Calder the last year and some other ones, but I mean, that's probably where I would look. I don't love John Hines as a coach in general. I don't think this team is going to really be making any kind of crazy splashes this year, so I don't love that. I would maybe think about Faber, but you're right though. When you think about it, you're talking about the guys, even Yossi, in the situation he's in. It's just really going to be difficult. He would have to put up like a historic season almost to even if those guys aren't ahead of him, like just the name value alone of those guys over him makes it difficult. Like Kel McCarr could have a down season and still get it over him just because it's Kel McCarr. So yeah, I think that's probably really all I would look at. Even the Ogren look, I feel like that's tough too. I mean, there's so many good players in better situations. But like you said, if he gets up to second line and can solidify himself, I would potentially be looking there. But we've seen the past.
That's kind of a
it's long shot.
Play.
Yeah, for sure. I just worry, like, at least historically, like Rossi was a guy like this that like would get called up, play a few games, and then bam, send back down. Called up, play a few games, and then right back down. So even like Sam Walker, not that he's like that great or anything like that. Like I think he has some upside for this team as well. Like up and down a lot with these guys just because of the veterans they have, kind of. So it almost feels like there's kind of like these blockages on this team, like Goudreau and like Johansson, that kind of need to go before we see something like Ogren really make a dent here.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts on this team? I think it's interesting when you break it down a little bit more. We're kind of going into this offseason. In my mind, it's kind of been the Minnesota Wild, and this is a team that's usually pretty good. They have some all-star players on that roster. They got a young core that's getting better and better. And now after we talk about it a little bit more, it seems like there's a fork in the road, and this season may kind of dictate which way they're going to go and which road they're going to take. So Terry, any final thoughts on the team? What you're hoping to see? What you think your best prediction is?
I do like the Ogren pick because I could see a situation. He's a very determined guy. If you watch his interviews here so far in the preseason, he really now, of course, all players want to make the team, but you can tell he really wants it, and he's been working hard all summer. If he gets put on that line with Boldy and Eck, and if there is chemistry there, he could stay there. He could stay there for the whole season. So for that, I would want to wait, see 5-6 games through the season and see where he's at point total wise, how he's looking, and then go from there. I'm really interested in and to see how the Wild does this season because as I said earlier, I could see them going completely tanking and trading Kaprizov, but I could also see them potentially making the playoffs and maybe shocking the world and winning a playoff round. So
Yeah.
there's kind of a lot of variance here with this Wild team, and I'm just interested to see how things work out.
Yep. I'd have to agree. Franco, any other last thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it from a betting angle for this team, I think there's going to be a lot of value on this team. I think Faber all season long last year for point and shots on goal was a great value. Kaprizov, even for goal props, like doesn't ever really get that bad, even when he's really running hot. So,
Yep.
and I've already talked about Boldy. So I think that's like more what I'm interested in general for this team. I think it's, like I said, a fringe team as far as the playoffs go. Maybe they get a couple bounces and they sneak in. But yeah, I think mostly like game to game, I think you're going to get a ton of value here. And I think that's mostly what I'm really intrigued for. Like when the season starts, I think we'll have some angles for betting player props with this team.
Yep, for sure. Well, thank you, Terry, for joining the show. Make sure you're following Terry at Let's Go Wild Picks on Twitter and X, and make sure you find his YouTube channel. He's got some links in his bio there. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube so you never miss an episode. We've been releasing every single team preview on a betting standpoint through the Hockey Podcast Network. We've got tons of great content coming your way. We'll be having weekly streams throughout the season, and you can find us on all social media platforms, X, Instagram, YouTube. And again, thank you to our wonderful sponsors, BetterHelp and DraftKings. And Terry, thanks so much for coming on the show. Again, can't say it enough, and how much you've kind of influenced a lot of some of these NHL cappers around the Twitter sphere, if you will. So always great talking with you. And we'll catch you all next time on the Expected Bets 4 podcast